Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. We are here from the Chantilly, Virginia studios at Kardec Radio in the United States of America. And today we're dedicating the program to meditation. And why can't we meditate? That's a question many have been asking. And we are so blessed that we finally found an expert in the field to actually address this question that many people have been asking around the world and sending these questions to Kardec Radio as well. We are happy to introduce to you very soon Nigel Wellings. He is the author of the very book titled, Why Can't I Meditate? How to Get Your Mindfulness Practice on Track. In this book, he writes to us about many of the questions that people ask and the reasons why we may find it difficult, but most important, how to come across it and overcome these obstacles. Because we know meditation is about, it's a health practice. It's beyond the it's not encapsulated in religious backgrounds any longer. It's beyond it. Neuroscience already has enough and compelling evidence to tell us that meditation can change our health. I remember in the year 2006 when I participated as a neuroscientist in the neuroscientific meeting of the United States that also welcomes neuroscientists from around the world, and Nobel Prizes like Eric Cadell and others were welcoming the Dalai Lama and his group to a keynote address, and I remember being there in the first rows. 11,000 neuroscientists were able to listen live to the Dalai Lama talking to us about meditation, and the reason why the neuroscience meeting was open with that keynote address was because we have enough evidence in neuroscience telling us that meditation, its practice, changes our brains and changes our feelings, changes the way we think about ourselves and life. What is meditation exactly? How can we meditate? What is mindfulness? These are words that are currently used even in medical practices, and many people are still unaware about what they are and how to achieve it. So Nigel Wellings, the author of the book, he has a background that has a lot of experience on it. He's a psychoanalytic psychotherapist and the author who works within a broadly contemplative perspective. He first attempted to practice mindfulness in his late teens and has been engaged with the relationship between psychotherapy and meditation for the last 40 years. He lives in Bath and is a teacher of the Bath and Bristol mindfulness courses in the United Kingdom. He's talking to us directly from the location, but before I open the line to him and we learn more and more from him and the book he published, I would like to share with you that the last Saturday we were in California for the United States 10th Spiritist Symposium, and it was fantastic. We had a wonderful experience with the speakers from around the United States talking about the transformative power of love. We learned many things, and we also were able to share our own studies on love and the brain. And we would like to share with you that very soon, through the efforts of Daniel Santos from the Spiritist side of Baltimore, we're going to be able to watch the recordings of all the lectures and the talks, the activities that happened in the symposium. So we're very thankful to the people who organized it in San Diego and also the people in the United States Spiritist Council, and for all the sponsors, all of our Spiritist societies who sponsored the event and made it possible for the public who came there, including children of 6 years of age and older, including teenagers as well. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was very uplifting. And many more things are happening as they are planning out the next one in Orlando, Florida. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Probably very much fun because it's going to be Orlando and people can go to Disney. I'm just joking, but some people like it. So, you can go visit Disney and stop by at the Spiritist Symposium in 2017 next year. Right now, I'd like to share with you a message. Right after this message, Nigel Wellings is going to be with us talking about his latest book, Why Can't I Meditate? And much more regarding mindfulness practice.
The need of meditation. Taken from the book Joy of Living by Joanna De Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco. An English translation can be found in the Spiritist magazine, issue number 24, page 35. Meditation is a valuable resource for a healthy and tranquil existence. Through meditation, individuals acquire knowledge about themselves, entering their inner reality and discovering the inexhaustible resources that lay unexplored within them. To meditate means to unite emotional fragments into a harmonious whole that eliminates phobias and anxieties. Thereby, individuals become free from feelings that incarcerate them and impede their advancement toward progress. The inhibition and excitations from the agitated and competitive world, as well as inner dissatisfactions and rebelliousness, generate a field of conflictive personality, which ends up making a disaggregated individual sick. Meditation favors a therapy of renewal that conducts us to the real and legitimate values for which we should strive. It is not either necessary to alienate from society, or to seek formulas and mystical practices, or to impose new habits that substitute for old ones, in order to acquire a state of peace through meditation. Some simple instructions are useful for those who want to renew their energies, reoxygenate their soul cells, and to reinvigorate their optimistic dispositions for advancing their spiritual progress. Calm breathing in a tranquil and deep rhythm is a predominant factor in the exercise of meditation. Soon after, the relaxation of muscles eliminates tension points in one's physical and mental spaces by expelling anxiety and doubt. Afterwards, keep serenity, move as little as possible, fix the mind on something of beauty, something superior and dynamic, like the ideal of happiness, beyond the limits and the objective impressions. This effort becomes a valuable tool to understand life and to discover the meaning of their existence, of human nature, and of one's own mind. Through this process, there is the identification between the creature and the Creator, thus understanding who one is, why one lives, and for what reason one lives. Meditation is not the moment to interrogate the intellect. It is for silence. It is not about running from objective reality, but to overcome it. It is not about pursuing a target in front of us, but to harmonize the whole. Complex methods or rational concepts are not applicable. However, we annul the action of thinking in order to feel, live, and become light. Individuals meditate to fulfill themselves, to liberate from matter, and to penetrate the range of the extra-physical world. Initially, feelings and thoughts will be a part of meditation until the moment when it is no longer necessary to think or to desire, but only be. Condition yourself to meditation after being fatigued. A few minutes a day, reserve them to meditate for the peace that renews for new phrase. After finishing your renewal, pray and thank God to bless your remaining life with goodwill to conquer the ascending steps that you must climb with optimism and vigor.
We're back, dear listener, and we're happy to share with you that we finally found an expert in the field of meditation that found educational ways. I would say a framework. I don't want to encapsulate it in a frame, but it's like a pathway for those who are willing to learn meditation and feel better in their own lives. So thank you very much, Nigel, for being with us at Kardec Radio today. How are you?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
And Nigel, I've heard from some friends of mine who talked about you in the book, and then I got to know of the book as well, that you came across the practice of meditation and the idea of mindfulness, being the present, when you were quite young. How was it for you? How did you come across this idea, and why did you embrace it?
Well, in your introduction, you made a big connection between mindfulness and neuroscience. But of course, mindfulness has existed for almost 2,500 years within the context of Buddhism. Mindfulness is the quintessential Buddhist practice. Yes. And I was interested in Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism. And in that context, I came across the practice of mindfulness. Simple as that.
But it's not trivial because, Nigel, some people come across these practices because they have friends and they get to know, or their spouses, etc. So in your case, it was a natural, something that drove you to connect with Buddhism and the practice of meditation and mindfulness through it. Was there any personal reason why you wanted to use this practice and incorporate it in your life?
Yes, very much so. Whether we approach mindfulness through a Buddhist or a secular approach, I think what's right at the heart of that, and certainly at the heart of all the people we've taught, is that we suffer. Our lives are full of experiences which are difficult to bear. And quite naturally, we want to find something that's going to make us feel better. So that, I think, for me, and I think others, is just about the universal starting point.
You talked about suffering, and it's very interesting because in the illusions of material life, many people are caught up in escape mechanisms. Would you say that people who are potentially interested in mindfulness, they are sick and tired of trying to escape away from the inevitable confrontation or the inevitable facing of our own reality, as people who naturally will suffer at some point in life?
In the book, I talk about people being more like a bus with lots and lots of different characters or different persons on that bus. And the people on that bus struggle to be in control of the driving wheel. So that's a kind of a metaphor to say that we're not really of just one mind. So yeah, of course, people come to the practice of mindfulness because they feel uncomfortable in themselves and they want to feel better. But quite often when they actually begin to practice mindfulness, they discover just how terribly difficult it is. And then another person runs forward and grabs the wheel of their bus and says, maybe I don't want to practice mindfulness after all. Maybe I want to do something else. So I don't think it's that straightforward. I think there's a kind of I want to do it, I don't want to do it kind of conflict which goes on in many of us.
And it's interesting we're talking about this because there's a chapter you talked about meeting ourselves, in a particular part that talks about our deepest wounds. And you mentioned above all things that it's important to identify the wounds and our patterns of hurt and how we defend ourselves. You say these are valuable. It's a valuable approach, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So it seems really simple, doesn't it, on the surface? Someone says to you, would you like to practice some mindfulness? And you go, oh, yeah, that sounds good. So you sit yourself down and perhaps you're directed to rest your attention on your breath or sensations in your body. Mm-hmm. And then after a couple of moments, and I really do mean a couple of moments, our thoughts break in and then we're kind of carried away into the past or the future. And we completely forget what we're doing. And then we kind of think, oh, I'm not actually in control of my mind. And then we find if we continue, that our bodies begin to get uncomfortable. And so we kind of just want to jump up and run off. Mm-hmm. And if we continue even longer, we begin to realize that there are thoughts and emotions that actually we don't really want to be in touch with as we're having them. And so again, we want to get away. This is the common experience of everybody who practices for more than a couple of moments. And if we keep on practicing, then it seems from talking to the struggling meditators who contributed to the book, that one way or another, we come into contact with places of hurt in ourselves, places of trauma, and that's where the practice takes us. And that's a good thing, because it helps us to be present in a kindly and compassionate way with those places of hurt inside of us. But at the same time, we've been not wanting to feel those places inside of us, probably all our lives. And so there's also a very strong current which says, oh, I don't want to do this. This is not what I signed up for. This isn't making me feel good. And so we kind of want to run away. So the central message of the book is that we should try to find a way to encourage ourselves to become present with those parts of ourselves that normally we would want to reject and not feel.
It's very interesting because in the Spirit's book by Kardec, he asked the illuminated spirits, like, what should be done for us to progress more steadily and avoid wrongdoings? And they said self-knowledge. And your book has practical exercises on how people can recognize, for example, their core beliefs and how these core beliefs may sometimes be limiting. So it's important for us to identify them, as you say. Would you like to share a little bit more on the reasons why it's so important, Nigel, to identify, or as you say, recognize our core beliefs?
Yeah. These core beliefs are the narratives or the storylines around the hurt that many of us, perhaps most of us, carry inside of ourselves. So, they're typically the voices which go on inside of us which say, I'm of no value, nobody loves me, nobody listens to me, I can never get anything right, this world is a frightening place, I've got to be in control or I'll die, I'm the only one who knows how to do everything, everybody else is an idiot. These are the kind of the storylines that we've got going along at the bottom of us. But actually, all of those storylines are about defending ourselves against things that we find difficult to feel. And life is full of stuff which is difficult to feel. So we kind of partition ourselves off, don't we? We split parts of ourselves off. I'm not going to go near that part of me which feels sad or afraid or intimidated by the world, intimidated by my own emotions. So when we begin to practice mindfulness and we get in touch with those voices inside of us, instead of turning away and continuing to hide away from parts of ourselves, we actually make friends with parts of ourselves. Do you know, that's the big place where psychotherapy and mindfulness cross over. If we think about psychotherapy as gradually gaining the ability to be able to have every single experience that can arise within us without fear, then that would be a very good definition also of the practice of mindfulness. How can I begin to allow every single part of myself to arise, to stay there for a little while inside of me, to watch it go, and not be so frightened of it that I have to kind of cut it off or push it away. So it's a kind of a really profound befriending of every single aspect of our nature.
So if we're talking about our nature and how meditation, the practice of mindfulness can help us out, we often say, for example, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Kardec mentioned that, we humans at the beginning of our, the humanity, we were only instincts. And then we evolved to more sensations, and now we are in the pathway of really having feelings. And you talk about feelings as well as one of the most important goals of this book. You call it the felt sense, and how important it is for us to be fully aware about who we are. It's like the emotional intelligence, the emotional awareness. Would you like to tell us more about this felt sense and how important it is for us to be fully aware of it?
Yeah. The term felt sense comes from a psychologist called Eugene Gendlin. And nowadays, people often forget him and use other words like introception to really talk about the ability that we have to focus our attention onto the interior of our bodies and feel the emotions that are going on there. There's nothing special about this except that quite a lot of people initially can't do it. They're not aware of what's going on inside them at all. Whereas, of course, there's a whole load of other people who can. Gendlin realized that those people who really could benefit from the practice of psychotherapy had the ability to be able to feel inside. So, a question would be asked, how are you today? What's going on? And somebody who could answer by just simply feeling into themselves and answering in the moment, yeah, that's what's going on for me now, could really benefit from therapy. Whereas somebody who said, well, my mother, she didn't like me, and then we had a green car, and then we had an uncle who kind of shot pigeons, this kind of answer, which actually takes you a million miles away from what's going on in the moment, that person found it more difficult. So Gendlin devised this method he called focusing to help us, those of us who found it difficult to reach inside and answer directly, to do just that. Now, that's an incredibly valuable skill, because the way I think about it is that our bodies are actually continuously being emotional. They are emotional responses to the environment and also what's going on inside of us. And so by being able to go down to that very, very simple level, notice what's going on, it gives us a way to be present with something which is continuously happening, which is our response to the environment and to our own internal world. I use focusing. I use feeling into the body continuously in my psychotherapy, and it's gone over into the book, because when we practice mindfulness and there's something coming up inside of us that we don't quite understand, some kind of resistance to doing the practice, it really helps to say, what's going on for me right now? What am I feeling? Where am I feeling that in my body? And then once we've identified it, perhaps there's a feeling in the throat or the chest, maybe somewhere in the solar plexus or the abdomen. We just rest our attention there, just being mindful, allow ourselves to be in touch with it, to feel it, to maintain a little bit of a relationship with it. We're not wanting to be completely identified, but very much in touch. And then just stay there. Just allow that contact with ourselves to be there, to be present with it. And of course, what we begin to notice is that every single emotion has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's constantly in a process of change. And with that begins to come a great freedom and a great sense of equanimity. I can allow things to pass through me. Nobody died. It was absolutely fine. And that's where the real freedom begins to grow. Yeah?
But for those who are listening to us and are still, sometimes the problem is not in achieving a certain level of practice, but understanding what it is first. So when people ask you, Nigel Wellings, what is actually meditation and what is this so-called mindfulness practice? What would you say?
Well, there are many different types of meditation, and mindfulness is just one of them. So if I speak just about mindfulness meditation, I would say that well, for a start, mindfulness has been around a long time, so it's going through many changes, and it's going through a hell of a lot of changes at the moment. So mindfulness is slightly in danger of becoming a word which covers a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But with that caveat in place, I would say that more traditionally, we understand mindfulness as being the cultivation of the ability to place our attention just one place and then keep on bringing it back to that place. So the Pali word for mindfulness is sati, which means to remember or to recall. So I place my attention on my breath, a couple of minutes go by and I drift away, and then I recall that I'm doing that, and then I come back to the breath, and then I'm there for a few moments, I drift away, I recall that I'm practicing mindfulness meditation, so I come back. So it's a practice of coming back. And the more I come back, the more I come back, the more I come back, then my concentration gets stronger. My ability to stay becomes a little bit longer, not a great amount at first, but a little bit longer. And then out of that concentration arises two things. On the one hand, calm. There's a sense of beginning to kind of slow down a bit, to still myself a little bit. And as I begin to still, I also begin to notice things about myself. I begin to notice what's going on. And so there's an insight from there. So out of the attention comes concentration, and out of the concentration begins to arise calm and insight. And that's it. We begin from there. That's our path. And of course, it's very difficult, and that's normal. Everybody finds it completely impossible. Lots of people have ideas that they should not be thinking, which of course is utterly wrong. Of course, we're going to think. That's what brains do. We just simply notice that we're thinking, and we bring ourselves back, and we bring ourselves back. There's no end to that. And that's just how it is. That's fine.
Interesting. And it's interesting because even people, as we said at the beginning, it's an ancient practice, and it's becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
And even after neuroscience adopted the mindfulness practice in its own investigation, it became more medically suiting for those who would like to prescribe mindfulness practice to their patients. But we also see, for example, in many of the Spiritist books, like Jesus in the Home and Good News and others, that Jesus used to meditate as well. And according to his own acts and actions, he was quite mindful. We've never heard, oh, Jesus was distracted, he didn't hear this, or he missed the opportunity of doing that. We know, like others, he was in the moment. But why is it so difficult for people to easily create the habit of mindful practice? Why do you think this is difficult for many people?
Well, you've already dipped us into that one right at the deep end, quite early to the beginning of this conversation. It's difficult because when we go close to parts of ourselves that we find difficult to be present with, everything inside of us just wants to run away. I think that's the deepest answer. The books has not exactly interviews, but contributions from a whole spectrum of mindfulness meditation teachers. Some Buddhist, some secular, one outside of both of those categories. When I talked to them, I said, why do you think people find it so difficult to practice? And they all said exactly the same thing. They said, it's about fear of death. And I said, fear of death? What, people think they're going to die when they practice mindfulness? And they said, no, not physical death, but the death of our sense of who we think we are and the beliefs and narratives, storylines we have about our life and our place in that life. So there's something really challenging about it. So I think on the deepest level, if we actually practice mindfulness, not just kind of dab at it, but properly practice it, then the insight that begins to arise out of that practice is challenging. You know, I may have a fantasy about myself as being a lovely, kind, spiritual person. And then if I actually sit down long enough, I realize that I have a whole chain of thoughts which is full of spite and revenge and nasty fantasies about people and what they've done to me. And suddenly, knowing this, my self-image is seriously challenged. I may have an idea about myself that I'm a kind of a deeply spiritual, meditative person. But when I actually sit and do some of it, I discover I'm thinking about the kids all the time and what I'm going to cook for supper and the party I'm going to arrange for my children next week. But actually, I'm a very busy person. I'm not calm at all. So, you know, there are insights that arise out of just simply sitting with ourselves and using the mirror of mindfulness to see ourselves. That's on the deeper level. Mm-hmm. On the more superficial level, which is what the front of the book is about, mindfulness is a bit like playing the piano in some ways. You need some discipline to actually make yourself sit down and do it. So most of us start off thinking it's a good idea. You know, we've listened to your radio program. We think, that sounds quite fun. That could be really useful. So we start off from a point of an idea, and then, as I say, we begin to do it. We find it's quite difficult to do. And then we falter. So if we can actually form some kind of habit, what I call a mindfulness habit, and we begin to establish a bit of a routine every single day, same time, same place as much as we're able, same amount of time. It doesn't matter if it's only a little bit of time initially. Then the idea that it's a good thing to do may just change into, this actually feels quite good. I know it's difficult, but it feels good. And then once we have that feeling motivator, you know, a bit like cleaning our teeth, we begin to feel weird if we don't do it one day. Once that feeling motivator comes in, then that helps to generate the energy and the commitment and the engagement with the practice. So that first hump is the first problem, how to change it from an idea to a feel good. Mm-hmm. And then once we get going, it's making friends with ourselves and not being driven off by what we find that seems to be the common idea of what the problem is.
That's interesting because, you know, when you're saying about sitting down, we know like for example, the Thich Nhat Hanh talks about mindful eating, mindful walking, so you can also incorporate that approach and the attitude in your moving actions as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I would add that one of the things that I think is incredibly important is mindful awareness of our emotions as and when they're occurring. And probably from my perspective, that's personally the biggest revelation of the entire thing. And I think also the thing that is most useful from all the courses that we take, that we give, is recognizing what we're feeling and being able to be present with it and not just simply driven along by it is of incredible value. It can help us be with all sorts of really problematic situations.
And talking about problematic, Nigel, one of the most difficult, as a psychotherapist, one of the most difficult situations is when people present traumas.
Yeah.
Etc. So would you say the mindful practice can help heal those who have different types of traumas?
Yes, I would. There's quite a lot of evidence for this. What I would say is, if we find, let's say we started doing a mindfulness course and maybe we carried on doing some mindfulness practice afterwards, or we're in a group of people who practice mindfulness regularly, if we suddenly find that there's a lot of very, very difficult body sensations or emotions, perhaps images arising, or that alternatively we find ourselves completely disengaging or what we call dissociating, it may just be that we're contacting some especially traumatic material. If that's the case, it's really very, very useful to find a psychotherapist who uses mindfulness as part of their treatment modality to help us through that period. So, for instance, the cutting-edge psychotherapists for trauma like EMDR, at the heart there's a real practice of mindfulness there. It's being present, it's not identifying, it's helping the trauma move through. So if we find that, I would really say, don't try to struggle on your own. Go and find a good therapist. Let them help you be mindfully present with that trauma, and it can be worked through.
I see. That's very good. Nigel, we're going to give a short break. When we come back, we're going to start about one of the most important parts of it, achieving compassion, the brave heart, and the very techniques you have talked about, how to meditate.
Okay.
From the book Living Spring, Chapter 86. Are you sick? And the prayer offered in faith will heal the sick person. The Lord will raise him up. James chapter 5, verse 15. Everyone gets sick. Nevertheless, very few stop to ponder through healing. If you yourself are sick, do not believe that taking medication orally or through the pores can restore you to full health. A pill may help. An injection may make you feel better, but never forget that real sickness proceeds from the soul. The mind is a creative source. Little by little, life molds around you what you desire. Of what use is external medication if you continue to be unhappy, discouraged, or rebellious? Perhaps you have asked human doctors or spiritual benefactors to help you, but at the very first sign of improvement, you abandon the medication or wholesome counsel and return to the very same abuses that caused your infirmity in the first place. How can you hope to regenerate your health if you spend all your time being angry or discouraged? Occasional indignation, when just and constructive for the general interest, is always a good thing, as long as we use it in the service of spiritual growth. However, daily indignation directed at everyone, everything, and even ourselves is a pernicious habit that brings unforeseen consequences. Discouragement is like an anesthetic that benumbs and destroys. And what about slander or idleness? When you spend your precious time on fruitless conversation, thus draining your energies? What miraculous genie can give you organic balance if you do not know how to remain silent or forgive, if you do not help others and try to understand them, if you do not humble yourself before the higher designs, or if you do not seek to live in harmony with others? No matter how quickly help from the earthly or spirit plane may rush to your side, you continue to waste your energies and become a thoughtless victim of indirect suicide. Therefore, if you are sick, my friend, learning to pray and understand, helping others, and preparing your heart for the great change is more important than any medication. Rid yourself of the transitory things that the divine power has loaned you in accordance with the law of usage. And remember that sooner or later you will return to the greater life where we always face our own conscience. Avoid being mean. Enrich your own qualities of personal sympathy by practicing fraternal love. Seek intimacy with wisdom by means of study and meditation. Do not stay in your pathway. Serve always. Work to promote the good. Hold loyally to the higher ideal that illumines your heart and remain convinced that if you cultivate the prayer of a living faith at every step, either here or in the beyond, the Lord will raise you up.
Dear listener, we are back, and it feels good, doesn't it? Do you feel more in the moment? I think I do too. More in the moment, this very moment. It feels good to be here. It feels good to be spending this time together, learning from Nigel Wellings. Nigel Wellings is a psychoanalytic psychotherapist who has been teaching and writing about the relationship between psychotherapy and Buddhism for the last 16 years. He has served as a director of training at the Center for Transpersonal Psychology and is the founder member of the Forum for Contemplative Studies and a facilitator on the Beth and Bristol Mindfulness courses. With Elizabeth McCormick, he has written and edited several books, including Nothing to Lose, Psychotherapy, Buddhism and Living Life. Most recently, he has contributed an essay to a new book edited by Anthony Molino, Crossroads in Psychoanalysis, Buddhism, and Mindfulness. And we are here mostly because also he wrote the book, Why Can't I Meditate? And it's not only a question, it's the title of the book, How to Get Your Mindfulness Practice on Track. And as the endorsement by Stephen Batchelor says, it provides practical guidance and advice for anyone who strives to understand and overcome the obstacles that prevent meditation from becoming an integral part of one's life. So, Nigel, one of the parts that I find very beautiful, kind of poetic in a way because of the way it's written, it's about the brave heart. When you write the chapter on It's Not All Pain. Let me read just the first part of it so the listener can be with us. It's page 283. A brave heart. Early Buddhism draw from the world in which the Buddha and his first students lived. There, on the edge of the jungle, lived lions, and it was with the fearlessness of these lions in mind that the Buddha embodied and taught that we now know as Buddhism. Later, Buddhism took up this image again, saying that the lion's roar is the fearless proclamation that anything that arose in our minds was manure to help the tree of awakening grow. I love it.
Thank you. I've forgotten about that.
Oh man, it feels good because, as you say, it's not all pain. There is a beautiful part that we can't miss. Sometimes we focus so much on what we don't want to feel, what we don't want to happen, that we forget about what we want to feel and what we want to have happening. Would you like to share a little more about your feelings and your thoughts regarding, when you wrote this part of the book, It's Not All Pain, and The Brave Heart?
Well, to be perfectly truthful, I was beginning to worry by the time I got to that part of the book that I was going to put everybody off. Because let's face it, it's not a book about, isn't this all wonderful and we're all going to go off to fairyland together. It's a realistic book about real meditators talking about their struggles and how they've found ways to resolve them. But it is about struggling. So I thought, okay, we mustn't just kind of give an entirely one-sided picture here. So hence that chapter. What I thought was amazing about the people who talk in that chapter was that although they were all beginning meditators, they'd only been practicing for very short periods of time, and they were having trouble doing it, just like everyone does. There were little bits and pieces, little insights that were coming out of their practice that were actually really profound. And I think the long story in that chapter about I can't remember what she's called in the chapter, to tell you the truth, but it's the lady who suffers from tinnitus. Do you remember the story? And she goes on a mindfulness retreat. She's been persecuted by her tinnitus to the point of insanity for a very long amount of time. And as she sits there, as often happens when we begin to practice, the thing that we're struggling with seems to get bigger because we're now allowing ourselves to notice it. And it kind of reaches a climax right in the middle of the night where she doesn't think she can stand it anymore. And then somehow she falls asleep. And in the morning, the tinnitus is gone. It's the very, very first time that she's been without this terrible noise in her head for many, many, many months. And no, I thought that was a very powerful story, and I know the woman very well, so I know it's not made up. I know it's absolutely true. She does say honestly later that it comes back a bit. It doesn't go away entirely forever. But I think there's a kind of a real pointer in there that when we can begin to turn towards ourselves fearlessly, like the lion, and begin to accept exactly what's happening in us without running away, then that's where the breakthroughs come. And that's where this breakthrough comes in the story. She really, really had to sit. She didn't run away. She was incredibly brave. And that bravery paid off. Whatever it was that was going on inside of her went through some profound shift. As I say, it didn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever. But it was a shift. It was a very real shift. And it gave her, if nothing else, the knowledge that she had some agency, she had some control over that tinnitus, whereas before she just felt the victim of it. Great story. I was very grateful to her for that.
Yes, it helps all of us feel the hope that we can also achieve such levels. And I love very much when you put together something quite unique, Nigel. I've never seen that before. Quick fix chart for the struggling meditator.
You get that in the back of electrical goods.
It's almost like a troubleshooting page or of a manual, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I wrote that bit first, actually. I sat down when I was on holiday and I just thought, oh, my computer's got all these quick fixes for when it doesn't work. I wonder what that would be like for mindfulness, and that's what came out.
Wow, that's amazing. And I one of the reasons why I think it's very interesting and efficient, it's because since the goal is to get to know of ourselves, you need to know what the issue is for you to go through the quick fix.
Yeah.
Charge, and it helps us in that regard. So you go through like that. Is my problem like not wanting to meditate? No, I want to meditate. Or I can't meditate every day? No. Oh yes, I have physical pain. So I like it because it's not like an endless troubleshooting list. It's one that is tangible and you quickly can go there. And the reason why I'm saying this is because many of us, when we come across a more spiritual pathway in approaching life, we dismiss the fact that we are in the body, and it's another dimension. We need to understand, as you say, like how we're feeling in the body because it belongs to the process as well. And we forget that, even becoming a meditator, there are things in our current modern times that, everything is more fast-paced and we can't change it or pretend it doesn't exist. So when I read your quick chart, the quick fix chart for struggling meditator, what I feel is that you're acknowledging we're at a time in which we need to make this knowledge more accessible to the everyday person, not only those who can, have the luxury of going to a retreat, because not everybody can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I think also, you talk about what's going on in the present time. I think in 2006 there were probably 3 or 4 books on mindfulness practice published. By the early, 2010, 2012, 2013, there was something like 270 odd. There's been an enormous escalation in the interest in mindfulness. It's absolutely everywhere. And of course, what our society does is it begins to commercialize it. People begin to brand it with their own personal names and, and turn it into something which is a merchandise. And to do that, it's got to be made to look kind of glossy and, it's going to solve all your problems. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And there's a kind of dishonesty in that, at least in my experience and in many of the mindfulness teachers I know experience, because we know that people do the courses and then it's actually very difficult to continue. So what I wanted to do in my book is to say, look, it is a great thing. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it isn't a quick fix, actually. Mm-hmm. There are no ways to make everything better immediately. This is a practice that's probably going to last the rest of your life if you really want to practice it. I hope it will. And working with the difficulties of the practice is the practice itself. It's not that those difficulties get in the way and then on the other side of them there's this wonderful kind of sunlit landscape of wonderful, fantastic experiences. Working with the parts of ourselves that don't want to practice, that don't want to be present with ourselves, is the practice. That's normal. And you talked about kindness and compassion a little bit earlier on, and I want to come back to that. And I want to say that this practice is full of kindness. It's full of compassion, because we need kindness and compassion towards ourselves to begin to find the acceptance that's at the heart of the practice. And of course, if we begin to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves, then we realize that everybody else around us is suffering in much the same sort of way. That comes out very strongly in the book. All the meditators more or less share exactly the same sort of problem. The details are just different. And so as we realize that, we're in the same boat with lots of other people, then our kindness and compassion extends from ourselves to others. And of course, that's incredibly important. That is the best motivator for the entire thing. It's not just us. It's not all about me. It's about everybody else as well.
And thank you so much for going back to the topic of kindness and compassion, because in pages 266 onwards, you talk about, as you were talking about the chapter on the damaged heart, you break down a meditation titled A Loving Kindness and Compassion Meditation. And it's interesting because it gives people a more tangible way of getting there, of practicing it. And as you said, we need to practice in order to really become natural at not only feeling, but using it when the tough times really happen in our lives. That's the realistic part of it. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the mindfulness, the loving kindness practice that you mentioned, the metta practice, of course, is a classic Buddhist practice. It's been practiced forever, generating kindness and compassion, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings. I think one of the things the book addresses is that for many people, practicing a practice like that is difficult because they don't feel love in their heart. They don't feel compassion in their heart. They feel something much smaller, much more contracted. So how do we deal with that? You know, we've been given this lovely practice generating loving kindness and compassion, and we're sitting there and we're feeling really crabby and hateful. Mm-hmm. What do we do with that? Well, one of the things we can do with that is we can just notice that's what we're feeling. Where am I feeling that in my body? I'm kind of feeling it in my chest. Goes the feeling. And so I can just allow myself to feel that and to breathe, not make myself wrong, not try to change it, but also notice that if I feel this, then there are probably innumerable other people struggling with exactly that same crabby feeling. So as I extend loving kindness towards myself for being a crabby person, I can also extend that kindness towards all others who suffer in the same way. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's the same thing. Get real. Deal with the emotions that are actually arising. Don't try to pretend they're not there. Make them the objects of mindfulness. Incorporate them within our practice with kindness, with compassion. Start where we are. Don't try to be different from where we are. All change occurs from where we are, not from where we would wish to be or think we ought to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you know, as you talked about being compassionate and honest, I can't believe when I was, learning from the book that one of the last parts of the book, I would say the last one before the further reading references, you do not hesitate to give it all to share the method of how to practice mindfulness meditation in the last pages of the book. I was like, it can't be real. He's giving it like it's like a gift. I'm not saying people should go straight to the last page of the book. That's not what we want because it doesn't solve the issues. But it's beautiful how you didn't hesitate in being practical, and I feel so compassionate in sharing the method in 2 pages.
Well, I'm surprised you say that because I mean the book is predicated upon the assumption that it's based upon the idea that people have already learned those methods of practicing mindfulness. But I mean, mindfulness is out there, isn't it? Any of your listeners who want to practice mindfulness can go to. There are many wonderful books by. My favourites are going to be Pema Chodron, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg. These people have been teaching mindfulness with an open hand since the mid-1970s. There are many, many, many very similar instructions on the practice, as you find in the back of Why Can't I Meditate? And of course, if you go to the internet now, there are loads and loads of secular sources for the practice of mindfulness as well. So, gosh.
I'm just saying this because, for example, we in Spiritism, because we rescue the Christ consciousness, and people are not, often people refer to Jesus and the Christ like they forget about how much he meditated, etc. So many feel estranged in regards to meditation, as if the mindful practice belongs to a particular religion like Buddhism or, to the Eastern traditions. And when you bring your book to the general public and you break down the method in the last pages as well, I'm not saying this is the only practice you break down, but you beautifully and very straightforwardly share it with everyone. I think you're making it much easier for the listeners at Kardec Radio, for example, who are spiritists and are not familiar, do not necessarily practice in their centers meditation, which is something that is not practiced in that regard in spiritist centers. That's why I'm also recommending to those who are listening to us to read your book and go to the exercises you propose, because it can become less of a myth in the spiritual practices that we have in spiritist centers as well. All right. So, Nigel, we're so thankful to you for the effort in putting together this very invitational book. And with your kindness, we feel your kindness and your honesty when you are bringing it so sincerely to all the readers. And now at Kardec Radio, sharing the making of the book, the ideas, and the proposal of making people live a better life with meditation, mindfulness practice. Would you like to share your final thoughts for the program today?
Gosh, the final thought. I think the best advice is don't think too much about it. Just do it.
Oh.
Don't make a fuss. Just do it.
I'm gonna share, tell Nike that you said that, because that's their slogan. Just do it.
I didn't know that. I didn't get paid for that.
They can sponsor you. Just do it. Don't think about meditating. Just do it. That's it. And thank you very much, Nigel. We hope to stay in touch with you and keep learning from you. Would you like to share a major website for people's reference if they want to know more about your works, the books, and also if they want to contact you directly as well?
Yeah, sure. The book has got a website. It's called Why Can't I Meditate? And there's no apostrophe or question mark in that. So it's just the letters, whycan'timeditate.com. And if anybody wants to contact me on my own email, or there's a contact page there, and the access is via that. And I think the website was for the English edition, which came out last year, but I believe there's an American edition now with an extraordinary bright yellow cover, which is a bit shocking to me. I hadn't seen that until it just came, which has just been issued by Tarcher this month, but the website works for both of them. So there we go.
All right.
Thank you for inviting me.
So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch with you, okay?
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardec.com. kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.